All right.
Welcome, one and all. This is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. Your
Wait, wait,
host,
wait. You got to
Martin.
press the button first.
Yep, done. We're
Oh,
live.
okay.
We're live
In
in the
front of all,
3050 and the whatever your zip code is.
in front of all these people.
We've got about 35,000 people
Okay. That's
potentially.
that's all. Chum, get with it, people. Come on. Only 35,000. Tell your friends, tell
Potentially.
your neighbors, tell your enemies if you want, but let them know we're on the air now, live. Bring it on.
All right, so welcome. What do you have for
Didn't
us,
me-
sir?
didn't mean to interrupt your flow there, man.
I had no flow. I was just opening the door.
Well, I know it's kind of a goofy start to get into a somber subject, but it is the case. I think we would be wrong not to mention that um, us basically we lost another star yesterday. Toby Keith um, lost a long battle with cancer and stomach cancer, and he died peacefully at home. Surrounded by family, and God bless him, and God bless his friends and family. The guy leaves behind a pretty strong musical legacy. He was one of those few people who successfully crossed over out of country music into various genres, mainly because of his sense of humor in a lot of his songs. Not all of them. He did some very serious music, but it it wasn't traditional, stereotypical something about motherhood, a dog or a truck type country music. It was country music that had a sense of humor and that folks could identify with, and that was part of his appeal. You know, um, Grammy winner, Grammy winning songwriter, and I think he's going to be missed. So Godspeed. So, um, man, it's wild when you think about it that we joke about these acts are getting old, and some of these performers are starting to age, and we're going to start losing some of our favorites and this, that, and the other. But then something like this, I'm 4 months older than he was, so this kind of makes me go, whoa, wait a minute. you know Somebody in their 80s passing away, it may be a surprise, it may be a shock, but it's when you look at it in the cold light of day, it's kind of like, all right, the person was in their 80s. But when somebody is younger than you passes away from something like this, it's like, whoa, there but for the grace of God go I.
I know.
So it's like, wow.
You don't have to yeah, I know. I know. It's a heavy duty one.
It is. It really is. And it's hard to get lighthearted or start talking about something else after talking about something like this. But I really honestly thought that we would kind of be doing a disservice I would be doing a disservice to myself and a disservice to his memory by not at least mentioning and acknowledging.
You know that
So,
Jamie Page and I share the same haplogroup as well.
no, didn't know that.
I
Oh, wait
was
a minute. Did you tell me this?
You wouldn't know. This is something else.
Oh, okay.
Autosomally,
Mm.
somewhere in there, there's sections that correspond to each other.
Yeah.
But paternally,
Hmm.
let's put it this way: he and I share Copernicus as a common father. As no, not a forgive me, as a common person that shares our haplogroup going back in time.
Oh, okay.
So at one point in time, one man
Hmm.
that was the father of me down the line throughout time was the father of Jamie Page down the line throughout time. The fact that today my grandfather came from Cantabria, Spain, to Cuba, to Miami, and where I was born, and the fact that Jamie Page practically never left England across the, as far as we know, across the
Hmm.
time scale, does not change the fact that we hail from the same father at that one point in time.
Hmm.
And thereafter, two brothers, two siblings split.
Hmm.
Well, they do because they're two different people. One went on to have more children, and the other one that became the children that became the direct one of them of Jamie Page, and the other brother sibling became the one that would eventually um, uh, me arrive to for me to arrive as an example.
Does he know this?
Yeah, we were talking and stuff, and I said, oh,
Okay.
let's do your haplogroup. Now he could refine his haplogroup further
Hmm.
by taking an actual test instead of using his autosomal to sort of suss it out.
Hmm.
But he falls within the R1B, which is
Yeah,
the most abundant
in
paternal
Europe.
haplogroup.
Yeah.
And so it's no wonder that people, I don't know, anywhere from Denmark to frickin', I don't know, Switzerland to, I don't know, France to just you name it,
Hmm.
Spain and beyond, are the children of a father, pulling it back, that created more children, that created children that propagated a family line of men that basically, let's put it this way, to be extravagant, colonized all of frickin' Western Europe.
Yeah.
There were other haplogroups, but the most abundant, and they wouldn't have known as they were marrying.
Well, how could you?
Yeah, they would never have known that. Hey, um, Tom from across the other village is a descendant by 1,000 years back or 500 years back or whatever the case. None of those men by a certain time would have known that they had this
No.
sort of thing. It's only today in the 2020s that we're actually learning that this is a fact.
Well, think about that. Go back to your high school days and think about the one guy, your biggest enemy in junior high or high school or whatever, your biggest enemy. You two just basically despised each other. And how freaky would it be to discover that you're related?
I didn't despise. I didn't.
You get what I'm saying. Maybe you had a rival or there was somebody you
I
just
had
didn't
people that
like.
despised me or showed outward
Yeah.
disdain for me, but I never felt. The only thing I objected towards other people
Mhm.
is the crap that came out of their mouth. That,
Yeah.
but I didn't attribute that. That didn't remove their humanity from them. Let's say.
Well, understood. But let's just say how freaky it would be to find out that you were related. And here it is, however many years later, and you discover that you're cousins. It's like, dude, you used to do this to me in school and this, that, and the other. And now I find out we're cousins. Hell no, you're not in the will, you know.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing. Well, I also discover. Well, it's been, but just on this sort of line, it doesn't much matter.
No.
And I could open. Well, no, what I'm about to say. It doesn't much matter. As an example, that I'm being broad with this, but it's I can actually back this up if
Mhm.
if people wanted to delve into it and sit through it, I can back it up. I can give my evidence for it. It doesn't matter whether or not I have Canary Island ancestors in my particular family,
Mhm.
and then there's Canary Island ancestors. I don't know. Let's say they're living in Canada, which there
Mhm.
are, or in Venezuela, which there are, or any number of places in
Yeah.
Europe, which there are. And it doesn't matter that I don't know who the heck they are. If you can trace one ancestor at least to the Canary Islands, you connect with all of them, and they're all basically people. So what I've come up, so I've I've seen on my tree, there's people that are now popping up in one place. They pop up in a, and so all these cousin matches that I have with all these names,
Mhm.
I'm like, well, now I understand. One way or the other, some guy or gal back there in my tree
Mhm.
branched children off that created those people.
Yeah.
The Canary Islands, the endogamy that occurred because it was a few select people in the beginning,
Mhm.
created all these other people that
Mhm.
multiplied and multiplied. And so you end, so through my one line, I connect with all those I'm not a Canary Islander at all,
But you have ancestors who were.
but I have ancestral lineage going. But me, as per se, although I could argue in some way, abstract way, removing, hey, I'm Canary, because in reality, in a bloodline way, you couldn't get more Canary Island through my one line, through my mom's line.
Mm.
But I'm no Canary Islander. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Nor am I
Never been
Cuban.
there.
Nor am I Cuban
Yep. Never been there. Don't have any.
at all.
Yeah.
Nor am I Cuban at all. All I am when it comes to using this type of reference, all I am, and in fact have ever been, is an American.
Hmm.
There's nothing else now. Ancestrally, I can definitely point you to, So that distinguishing factor, which is kind of what my father hinted at years and years ago when I was a
Hmm.
little kid standing in Little Havana, and he pointed at me and said, "You're American." And I looked at him and I was like, "Oh, okay. You don't have to tell me that twice, Dad." And he said, "I'm Cuban." And I was, he's Cuban. And then he pointed to my grandfather. He says, "And grandfather is a Spaniard." And I started bawling, crying, tears down my face. And he said, "Okay, okay, that's enough." And everybody was looking. To me, my father's one thing, I'm one thing. Okay, I can handle that
Hmm.
as a little kid. But now you're going to distance my grandfather even further, giving him a title
Hmm.
that distances my grandfather, because I loved distances my grandfather
Hmm.
from the myth. Why can't he be Cuban or American? Why are you trying to even distance him even further, you son of a gun? Why?
Might as well have just said he's a cocker spaniel.
It was, but he was right
Hmm.
in his distinction.
You just weren't able to process that at that point. Yeah.
Right. So, I've run across people
Hmm.
where, and you know the story.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're Cuban American. No, thank you. Not because I have any, I totally love, I shared the history, but that's not correct. Are you, I don't know, a mountain dwelling American? Are you a
French American.
flat foot, flat plane? Are you a hyphenated whatnot? No, screw that. I'm not gonna give you a pass on that. What do you, no.
Hmm.
And so, but a lot of people go there because what it is you have to categorize people into boxes, and that's what categories are there to do. But get it right. And so, but anyways, long story short, um, I'm pretty surprised. No matter how much I've reviewed it, that I connect with a bunch of people that I had no freaking idea that I connect, bloodline wise,
Hmm.
to to include, that I've discovered thus far, to include indigenous. You have to understand from our perspective, or at least growing up, all it ever was no, we Spain, we come from
Hmm.
Spain, because it's just one generation away.
Yeah.
That's all we were. Okay, but you're American. That's a heritage thing, and that's it. This is not a typical American understanding here in the United States due to generationally. Now, somebody like Jim would understand that because Jim's parents came from England, so he'd understand certain nuances as far as self experience. But an American that has lived, or generationally has, they have a different perspective, and maybe this one perspective is a little bit off. Like, well, how is that exactly? And one would have questions. But to include indigenous Canary Islanders, people that you do not know, like as far as history is concerned, they're not quite sure how the heck they ended up on these islands.
Yeah.
That is freaking mind blowing stuff. And Jewish converts,
Hmm.
that when the Catholics said, enough with that stuff, you either convert or you got to boogie on out of here. To include that. And so, well, they mixed into the rest of the population
Sure.
that became my tree. So it just became a history of everybody, but these are real histories. So I find it super interesting, the whole thing. Trying to work it out, because you're looking at a bigger picture than what one would usually be used to.
Hmm.
As far
Well,
as like our picture would be our parents, our grandparents, and great grandparents, and
that's what I'm getting. That's what I was getting ready to say, because until you started down this path, the only thing you knew was that those three generations back. Maybe you had a little bit of insight a couple of generations further back than that. Maybe you heard a few stories, but you went your entire life never questioning it, because why would you? You had no reason to,
no, you
you
could
know?
easily no. As far as my
And,
grandparents, no. As
and,
far as our history, you have to understand. All my people recently
mhm.
were from people that were from Europe.
Well,
Like
I
my
understand
my
that.
my parents. But with that, but you don't tell a kid. And now we're going to talk about the 1400, and neither they. All they thought of is that we hail from the Canary Islands, we hail from Malaga, or we hail from this part of Cuba, or but so, but that's sufficient for a kid like me in
Well,
America
sure.
to say, oh well, we come from those places, and that's good enough.
But how much that you have discovered did they know? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like beyond that, going back to indigenous Guanche people,
Yeah. Did they know that?
no,
Probably not.
no,
So, you know, what can you say?
no, they wouldn't have known that.
Hmm.
Um, and they wouldn't have known how interconnected we are.
Hmm.
They would have
Well,
known a bunch of these things.
well, yeah, they have no reason to. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no way they could have known, because all this is fairly new, and they had no reason to question what they had been told by their parents,
Well, it
if they
doesn't
were told
change.
anything at all. You know.
No, but let me reword it myself. There was nothing to question, because
Hmm.
as far as history went back, they were Canary, like talking about the Canary Islands. They were basically Canary Islanders, and as far as history was concerned, they understood, like they literally
Hmm.
understood this, because growing up they had. I didn't focus on this. They would tell you that those people traveled from Europe to the Canary Islands and populated. But that was something they didn't say. Well, did you know that back in the 1400s, one of our none of that was
Yeah.
something. But as far as they knew, according to the family around them and the histories around them and stuff, it pointed to the Canary, which it does anyhow.
Yeah.
But the extra steps and that I've taken just out of, because I'm an exaggerated type of, I can't let enough, I can't leave let what's the saying,
Leave well enough alone.
I can't leave well enough alone. I've got to dig and poke and prod and dig.
Yeah, but that's
And
how we discover stuff. So, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, so but to me there's a lot of cool things, but all that
Hmm.
going back in time has been super, number one, fun, um super mind opening, and I love, yes, I obviously the paternal side and all that a lot, but
Hmm.
this indigenous Canary Island
Hmm.
subject is freaking just the stuff of like there's a curiosity that has sprung
Mhm.
up, um, that I just can't get enough of. And I haven't done, like, it's been other people that live there and have been there generationally that have done
Mhm.
the work and stuff. So I've been trailing them and stuff and all that. But
Yeah. Well,
um
that's what I was getting ready to say. Through this journey, you have met people that you never would have met otherwise.
oh yeah,
You've made connections with relatives that many of which you didn't even know you had. And
yeah,
so it's opened up a whole new world. So, Jim
yeah,
Dockrell threw in here. He says, "My dad was born in Canada. His dad was born in England. His mom was a Brit." Okay, so but still, you're not that far away from the immigration to Canada. So maybe you can kind of relate to what Eloy was talking about, having a different kind of a perspective from those of the immigrants who came there.
yeah. He would have, if I would associate it like I did with my experience.
Mhm.
Obviously, he's in Canada, I'm here, but running parallel. Well, number one, in Jim's case, he had, well, he told you the differences and
Mhm.
stuff. But so you had people that had information or were informed in a different manner than the people already here.
Mhm.
In particular, there's more people like Jim than we believe in terms of his recentness. Like
Oh,
in the United States, there's way more than we would
uh,
quickly imagine.
if you put even a little bit of thought into it, I would imagine it would not be a surprise to anybody. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
but what
because
happens? What happens with people? I'm using Jim as like conveniently, but just it could be any. But like say with Jim in general, what happens with people like Jim in a in the context of family members, maybe something as simple as a recipe that grandma,
Mhm.
just any number of, or a colloquial thing that happened in his neck of the woods in England, like just all these things. Well, he says yes, there is some cultural influence, but here's the thing that I wanted to say, which we've talked about. What happens too is that, in my opinion, I see it with myself. All it takes is the one generation, the Jim generation, to soak up everything that is in one fell swoop. Not everything, because there may be other notions that are
Sure,
unavailable. There may be other notions that are like, I do have unavailable notions to me, but I think it's due to religion as well. I like historical religion. I'm not quite, actually I'm fairly confident in what I would say, but I'll leave that alone. There's all it takes is one person being born in a place and growing up in the schoolyard and interactions and maybe TV and maybe blah blah,
hmm,
all these things, for that person to be basically an example, me.
yeah,
There's nothing that you could that and I could not discuss about our country. Well, there may be some things, but in general, because I mean you can't say everything, but in general, there's nothing that you and I could not interact on
right.
if we were interested in doing so.
Because our entire experience has been based on living and growing up here. We've soaked up
Right,
the American experience, so that's the only thing we have as a reference point. We
right, yeah,
have assimilated. We become
right,
part of the American culture, and we love it or hate it, or certain portions of it, based on our likes and dislikes. It's
yeah,
become a personal thing.
yeah. And the only variation are those variations that
Hmm.
we're discussing now. That, like the thing we asked, we you talked one or a few years ago when you said, "Oh, what kind of traditions happen during New Year's
Hmm.
for different places?" And then because you asked a question, I told you, "Oh, for some reason, we take 12 grapes and eat them right before once the clock strikes, or something like that." And then some other little colloquial things and stuff. And you were like, "Oh, so there are variations that are due
Sure.
to like a recipe and this and that, but
And cultural history, cultural backgrounds.
and there's cultural variations as well."
Yeah, and that's what I meant. For instance, your mom growing up, she cooked food that she and your dad liked, and you developed a like for certain things, and maybe you didn't like other things
Yeah,
as much, but you grew up. That was the norm for you.
yeah,
So that's just one aspect of a cultural difference. You know, I grew up with certain things because of where my parents came from. You grow up with certain things from where because of where your parents came from. But you had no reason to question any of it. I mean, when you're a 6-year-old kid and you get an orange in your Christmas stocking, you just think, well, everybody gets an orange in their Christmas stocking. I had no reason to question it. I didn't know why. I didn't know why until like last year, you know. I just never thought to question it. Why would I? But we
yeah,
don't know how much of that is cultural and how much of that is just American.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of different. Another thing we've touched on in the past, but we have done
Mm-hmm.
is, which is of interest to me because I'm actually looking into it in reference to,
Mm-hmm.
is the different variations of the category of Spanish
Mm-hmm.
or Spanish culture, and what that means and what that represents in terms of culture, food, culinary, music, and all these, or language or just all sorts of, and heritage.
I have a question.
What's that?
Are you talking about within Spain, or are you talking about the overall Spanish heritage as it was
Yeah,
exported to other places?
that.
Okay. Because it's different in Puerto Rico than it is in Cuba, than it is in Mexico, than it
Yeah,
is in El Salvador.
yeah.
So, okay.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Okay.
Which, all is derived
Hmm.
from that original place. There's so many variations.
Hmm.
To me, I understand that because I grew up knowing that, well, my family came from Cuba.
Hmm.
That's not Mexico. That's not Puerto Rico. Although I could make the argument very easily right here, right now,
Hmm.
and I am doing it, that within the cluster of the Caribbean,
Hmm.
you will not find, you will find in many ways more associated commonalities between the islands across the greater and lesser Antilles, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic,
Hmm.
and all the way down, just all of them, in terms of the decisions that they make with food,
Hmm.
in terms of the linguistic um, similarities, although they're very different too. And there's more commonality there than a place like, but it's not true at the same time at the 100% with a place like Mexico, let's say.
Hmm.
Um, but that's not 100% true because people went back and forth in different combinations.
Right.
So
Well, but you basically, like, just sticking to the food subject, if you're in Cuba, you are basically, you have two choices, and that is you feed yourself on what is there, or you trade for other things that you don't have. So it would seem to me logical to me that the diet in Cuba would be different from the diet in Honduras because they have whole different resources to gather from. They have whole different influences based on the indigenous peoples who were there. They have different experiences in doing. Now they may have the commonality of the language, they may have the commonality of the predominant religion, they may have a bunch of other things in common that they brought with them from Europe, but those things had to adapt the minute they put down roots. It's, I mean, we're talking about, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto, writ large here. You're talking about millions of people.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you
that
can
is the fact.
expect there is some difference.
Yeah, that is and of course, something as simple as, now take this with a grain of salt
Hmm.
because I have not looked into it, but
Hmm.
I'm imagining it from the things you just said
Hmm.
as a possibility that I think is reasonable, but maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
Something as the jalapeno
Yeah.
makes a big difference. The jalapeno, like when I was out west
Hmm.
and in Mexico, And by the way, I personally like spicy food in moderation.
Mm.
I am not opposed. In fact,
Man,
when I
people
was
out
in
here went jalapeno crazy.
when I was in California, I mean, you have to understand that the Cuban um, culinary
Hmm.
options are a Caribbean
Yeah.
adaptation of peninsular Spanish
Hmm. Recipes. Yeah.
recipes. So that doesn't include hot and spicy at all.
Right.
At all. Like there's none of that.
Hmm.
But it is something found towards the west and whatnot and this and that.
Hmm.
Further west. I personally I like you've said, I'm a little adventurous like you, unless it's something like some weird thing like intestines and stuff, then I can't. But when it comes to a little bit of spicy spice here
Hmm.
and a little bit of curious things, just
Hmm.
in the mix, I'm freaking open to trying it.
Yeah. I like it when it enhances the flavor of the food, not cover it up. I don't want
Yeah,
I don't want, 3 alarm fire in my mouth. I want to be able to taste the food that I'm eating. You
I'm
know,
totally
if
open to it, like you are.
yeah, if I'm gonna spend 12 hours cooking a brisket, I want to taste the brisket. If I just want spicy hot, I'll have sriracha and Doritos. It, it, I, I want to taste the effort I put into this meal here.
Yeah.
You know.
So there's differences like that,
Hmm.
but here's the interesting thing, which is freaking interesting, and how that works in each particular case. There's an overarching similar possibilities within the human the theme of humans
Hmm.
um propagating, moving around, and all these this and that. But the funny thing is, with all those differences that you said, or that we've said,
Hmm.
what I would have assumed, and it's true to a degree, but it depends on how you look at it. What I would have assumed is we have our people from our area, and that's absolutely true,
Hmm.
but that's not the whole truth. The
No,
whole
because new
truth,
people come in all the time.
well, no, well, yes. Well, what I'm getting at is that the whole truth, or a fuller accounting, is back a few years when I showed you my DNA test. But then I went into my cousin matches because they offer the feature of cousin match, and lo and behold, the the panacea of people from all across the world, to include all the Spanish world,
Hmm.
meaning the Americas and whatnot, to include places beyond the Spanish world,
Hmm.
be it Germany, Russia.
Hmm.
I don't care what place you point to. It gets less and less the further east you
Hmm.
go, like as in like a more Asian distance.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit more. But if you're talking about anything to do with Europe or
Yeah.
anything to do with the Americas, there's matches everywhere.
Yeah. And the main reason,
Obviously,
the
obviously
main,
they're
yeah,
not. It's not like, hey, this is my first cousin once. It's
sure.
not like that. That's not the
No,
point. The point is that
you have a
even all
common
those,
ancestor somewhere back there along the line.
yeah. So like we do see the culinary
Hmm.
differences, maybe linguistic variations, this and that. But people freaking got around in terms of that, especially in the Americas, which we have touched
Yeah.
on.
Well,
So there's all that. So I've been dealing with that, enjoying it, but trying to see how the heck and stuff, and it has been interesting. But Jim would minus, unless he takes a DNA test and this and that, and then he'd see whatever variations he has in his tree and or his cousin matches. But he would know culturally that, oh well, this was different in our family because mom and grandma and grandfather,
Hmm.
and they lived in this place in Birmingham, or wherever it may have been,
Yeah.
and they had these different ways of conducting, I don't know, whatever their
Well,
life.
he kind of goes into it a little bit here. He says there was some cultural influences. Although mom was a great cook, used spices, loved flavor, very un-British. Which I've heard, British food is pretty bland compared to, but I think that's a relative term. He says, but then again, I do know what a boot and a bonnet is on a car, and along with what a lift is and a lorry. If you get into a little bit, I mean, just a little bit of the pop culture, you're going to pick up on stuff like that. I mean, I know what those are. I know what a boot is and a bonnet. I know what a lift and a lorry is. But you kind of pick that up through pop
A
culture.
lorry's a bus or taxi,
No, it's just a truck.
or just a truck.
We would call it a semi truck. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I bet I'd be remiss if I didn't take note here. Rick French is back. He's been AWOL for about a year. And he's had a lot on his plate, most of it to do with lighting fires, I've noticed. Let's hope he got that completely out of his system. I know, Rick, I made that joke last night on the members only live stream, but I had to do it for a different audience here. Um, but he said that he's currently planning a European trip for June. One of his bucket list stops is the house in England his grandfather's grandfather was born in the late 1700s. He was the last French in your heritage born in the old country. Oh, okay. All right. There's a reference to the house location in the old family Bible, and his grandfather was able to find a modern address for it in 75. That sounds awesome.
Where did
That
he
sounds
sing?
back in England, somewhere in England. He was the last uh, person with the last name French to be born in the quote unquote old country.
So
So that's cool.
so I'll I'll add some extra thoughts and stuff, and I don't know that you would disagree
Mhm.
at all. Like, it doesn't, but there has to be people that would, because there's people for everything. Um, I've always enjoyed it anyhow, but things like that,
Mm-hmm.
like what Jim and Rick have, and even Harju that just popped in, his stories, your
Mm-hmm.
stories of the history of the Lindsays in
Mm-hmm.
your particular ways. When I hear your stories, obviously I'm interested in my stories of my families, but notwithstanding, what happens to a person, what happens to me when I hear stories of people, these are real flesh and blood human beings with particulars in their stories that connect to historical things. I can't help but to tell the human story in an individual way, for me, cannot help but um it warms the heart. Let's say it brings
Mm-hmm.
the world in my mind closer in a loving way. Let's say, I'll say the word loving, in a loving way, because I've always liked that. You can
Well,
you can picture and internalize the histories of people and such and this and that. I mean, I have been focused on my specific thing, but it doesn't. It's the human story, so I can't help but be a fan of
mhm.
stories, of
Well,
histories.
it's real easy to forget that all history is personal. It's easy to say there was a wagon train left point A and got to point B, and they were gone. It took them 9 months to do this, that, and the other. It's one thing to say that. It's another thing entirely to say that your ancestor was on that train and they went from here to here, then from here to here, and they were making about maybe 10 miles on a good day, which
Yeah.
is why it took them so long to do. That's another thing entirely. So when history starts getting personal, for me anyway, I can't speak for anybody but myself. For me, it starts to get a little bit more exciting, and it's ding dong sure a lot more interesting. because I grew up hearing about the Oregon Trail all my life, but I never really gave a damn until my dad told me, well, you had a relative who was the leader of the what they called the cow column on the first migration out along the Oregon Trail. Say what? Yeah. Well, hell, you know. So now it becomes interesting and I want to know more. But just hearing about this thing called the Oregon Trail, yeah, all right, that's cool. Glad they made it out here,
It's
you know.
difficult in that way that you said, because to view it so you could have a particular interest as an individual
Hmm.
over the history regardless of that,
Yeah.
but once you introduce that you're saying,
Hmm.
it just
Yeah.
slams open the door in a direction that
That
is
you didn't know
impossible.
existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could have a general interest. You could have a general interest in your region or your hometown. I don't know. Okay, well, it was started in 1852 as a result of a couple of settlers here who saw these big wide open plains and they decided they were going to raise cattle. Okay, fine, cool. Sounds great. But then you find out that the fourth family to come into the area was your ancestors. Now it becomes a little bit different, you know. So, yeah, Dan had to go for one of the Oregon Trail jokes. You have died of dysentery. No, we got flush toilets and running water too. We moved up in the world. Jim Dockrell says, I just watched a thing on a large migration of people around Roman times from Ireland to North England to the Iberian Peninsula. That could be your DNA connection to that area. Anything's possible.
The way I see it, according to what my understanding is, now Roman times, you're that's pretty heavy duty going back in time.
That's
Um,
way back there. Yeah.
that's like going way back in time into the 300s and prior. It's AD. You're going back in time to a place where we can not necessarily, unless through DNA, we can sort of get a glimpse and stuff. Well, my understanding is, in reference to that,
Mhm.
removing everything in terms of, let's say, my family tree with all the branches,
Mhm.
starting with you, your parents, your grandparents, great grandparents, and forking out into this huge blossom tree of individuals,
Mhm.
back in time and stuff. Um, if I remove all of that, which can be looked at, but let's just remove all of that and just look at my paternal line
Mhm.
through the Y male DNA,
Your direct paternal line. Yes.
just the direct paternal line, and for the moment, for this mental exercise, eliminating thinking about all those other people,
Mhm.
just looking at that paternal line and the DNA test that I took for my paternal line. What it what FTDNA is suggesting, along with hundreds of thousands of other males around the world, including the UK and the United States and
Mhm.
Spain to a lesser degree and other parts. The most people that take the test are people of Northwestern European descent. Currently,
Mhm.
I am not of Northwestern European descent in current times. I am of Southern European descent. Anyways, um, if you take all those things into account, like an American would, oh, where do they hail from back in Europe? And so, okay, just taking that line of my father through the test, my ancestral father, uh, this is what FTDNA the most, and taking all the other haplogroups into account, left Africa an extreme amount of time in the past, traveled into the Middle East an extreme amount into the past. But here's going to be the cliffhanger. But I have to get there. I just crossed into um, Asia,
Mhm.
up across China into the Russian into Russia, across over into the Russian steppe,
Mhm.
way back, according to the bones found and the testing of other alive today people. And then from the Russian steppe, we'll make a pause as they enter what is Europe and then further Western Europe. All those people, father to son to father to son, across time, living, having children and dying in a direct line of, of succession,
Mhm.
are the fathers of me, of people like Jamie Page. And the majority of males, probably you, Jim, because England is an 80% chance, according to the figures, of being R1B. Spain is an 80% chance, particularly in the coastal regions up through the, let's say, can the Bay of Biscay, which is basically following the trail down France and all the northern coast of Spain and inland down, excluding it gets lighter in terms of percentage of being R1B. The further east you get in Spain, it's still everywhere though. It's higher than
Mhm.
other parts of Europe. Anything West Europe, all the males are the same males of the same people that came into Western Europe. But I can't say that because we have Mark here. Mark,
Always the oddball.
so basically, what I'm getting at with that bit is that if you just look at my paternal line, they would have been in England before
So,
before any Roman even existed. But it wasn't even England. It was basically Celtic people,
mhm,
flat out, flat out Celtic people. And by the way, this can all be it is what it is. Celtic people that settled there took over everybody that was there, mated with the women, and created who we are, regardless of whether you're Spain, doesn't matter. Regardless of whether you're Greek, doesn't matter. Regardless of whether you're from, I don't know, frickin' Norway, doesn't matter. They populated everything. What did he say?
said I would imagine there was some trading of DNA along with copper and tin. Yeah, but the thing that Eloy is trying to point out is the people from England weren't just, they didn't just sprout up from the ground there. It's quite possible that equally as possible that the DNA connection Eloy has with England, Ireland, Scotland could be the result of people who divided somewhere in his past, and those people settled in England, Ireland,
No.
and Scotland.
Oh, yeah, that is possible, but I'm just focused on the one male line.
Right.
Of the
But what I'm getting at is there are a lot of different possibilities. It's probably further back than, I don't know. It might have been Bronze Age.
I'm trying to exclude all the other lines
Yeah,
where
me
that
too.
would where that would where
Mhm.
that would apply, that what you're saying, because I wanted to just say that the men that produced you, well, I have to put, I'm getting to Mark, but
Mhm.
the majority R1B of
Mhm.
Western Europe thins out the further east you go,
Mhm.
and it becomes another type of haplogroup, but they all mix with each other too. But I'm just focused on the one. So in other words, everybody's mixed with everything. It's just, if you really there's no, there's, but then there's other questions. What I wanted to get at is that before any Roman intervention or existence, right, in the Bronze Age or from the Bronze Age on, there's a map. I mean, I could bring it up and stuff. Where the father that's my father literally is the father of every other individual male today, from England to frickin' I don't know, Switzerland and Sweden and France and Germany. It doesn't frickin' matter. It literally genetically does not frickin' matter in terms of it being the majority haplogroup, the fact that people look different, or I have dark hair, um, you know, that's another story. The reason for that is that people mix, um, colloquially, and the more you mix colloquially, the more you start to have similarities in your colloquial, in your localized little regions, because it keeps producing again and again. That's very
Yeah,
true.
dominant genes. Yeah.
That's it's just part of the selection. But as
Mhm.
far as the paternal thing, well, anyways, for Mark, he has a different particular story. His answers, his ancestors, yours or mine, would never have known
Mhm.
either way that, oh, be careful with this Lindsay fellow. He's an I too. What? He's a what? Nobody would know.
Mhm.
No,
I2A.
he's an I2A. Oh, is he now? Well, we're R1B. Nobody knew that until like for the
Yeah.
last, it's
We,
only
we had a
2 years.
few mountain ranges that separated us. So,
No, no. Well, here's the bit. So in Lindsay's case, his people likewise came out of Africa, but
mhm.
and into the Middle East. But instead of the Middle East, oh, I'm sorry, instead of heading further east like the R1B people did,
Mhm.
Mark Lindsay's people, according to all current whatnots, understanding, and we're talking. I mean, there's plenty to
Yeah,
his
this is
people.
several thousand years ago. Yeah.
His people went up, or his direct paternal, leading to him,
Mhm.
and he wasn't the only one. It's not like there's Lindsay and then there's all these. No, there was countless I two A's
Mhm.
that went up through the Middle East and then into that Eastern Europe,
Mhm.
Levant, Anatolian, and then into Western Europe. And it's the oldest that they can figure of these people that came out of Africa that populated Europe that became Europeans today. He has the oldest, long-standing,
Yeah.
people in Europe, male paternally.
Mhm.
But bringing in all the other people in my tree, now we're just including all of them. All those individual. This is key. Without this, it's if you include all those other people, not all my other people in my tree. This is key. Without this, we might as well throw in the throw it all in the trash. Even though Mark Lindsay is the I2A and I'm the R1B and all this and that. If you bring in all the other ancestors in your tree, they were not all I2 1A or R1B.
I2A. No.
It can't be. They were all sorts of other things
Mhm.
from all sorts of other places intermixing across so basically what I'm getting at, just like the what do you call this, the Canary Islands, where I can tell you with a degree of confidence that, or just looking at my tree and the registers of births, which they're doing, and I'm being facilitated that because I'm hitching a ride. I'm connected to all these Canary Islanders, regardless, all of them.
Mhm.
Eventually, I can't figure it out right now,
Can't
or maybe
document it. Yeah.
never.
Mhm.
But like paperwork wise, but I can see enough that I'm saying, holy crap, I'm connected to all these different surnames from these people across the board in different combinations, and there's no controlling that water spout. So
Mhm.
what I'm getting at is that just like that, we are all the so that's why when some people out there, which I do fight with, oh, because my people were the Roman empires, and Europe, and my people were the Vikings. No, dude, everybody has Viking. Just everybody has Viking. Some people have more Viking than others. That's true. Like a Jamie Page.
Mhm.
Jamie Page is an exemplary. If I could right now, I'd place a freaking purple thing on it and a crown, because Jamie Page is wild as far as his. He's got, because he's from that area, so he's got that that regional whatnot. So that's the point. That's the bit, Jim.
Yeah. I mean, if you can pinpoint Alexander McMixon married Juanita, whoever, then okay, great. But if you can't, it's
You don't know.
anybody.
Yeah.
It's anybody's guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
it all comes down. Let's see here. What you're describing is called the Hallstatt theory. I don't know enough about the Hallstatt theory to comment on that. It's basically an explanation as to how the Celts ended up in mainland Europe. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I haven't read it enough. Appears we have a troll.
I could answer
Bye
that.
bye.
I could answer that too. So I've really delved into this.
Mm,
Yes, anything is possible. And no, I'm not a geneticist, and I'm not. But I so if you there were two theories.
mm,
Actually, you can break it into further, but there were two theories.
mm,
One of them was what Jim is suggesting, which is the true one, in my opinion, according to the data that geneticists agree with, as well as archaeology. Just, but regardless, is that they came from the east and traveled west, which is what the DNA suggests as far as haplogroups and
mm.
whatnot. The cultural findings with vases and ceramics and grave
Right.
sites, and linguistically as well. There's a connection. All languages that are Indo-European from India all the way to it's all you can make the connection very easily,
Mm,
as opposed to not in any event. There's another theory that the Celts came to Spain and repopulated the rest of repopulated the British Isles and such and this and
yeah,
that.
that's the Ernfeld Hallstatt theory. Is the origins of the Celts lie with the Hallstatt culture of the Alps.
Mhm.
From there, they spread across Europe, living in areas including France, Italy, Germany, Poland, Spain, and Britain in a series of waves.
Yeah,
So,
that's the one. If for my money,
mhm,
and I'm not getting it just because I'm inventing it in my house in a dark lit room. It's because I'm reading the literature that they have, and the DNA is freaking telling you. I mean, they have charts and they tell you
well,
your
yeah,
cousins and stuff. So it seems like people came from the east into Europe,
mhm,
bringing that Celtic culture, and that's what we are,
mhm,
all of us.
yeah, we're all nuts. So, you know,
Well, yeah, well, well, but this is anciently
yeah,
there was a culture, and they didn't think in terms like what we think in terms of like ancestry, like, oh, you're regionally from here, and this they didn't
no,
freaking think these things.
no, there was this tribe, and that's it. You know,
I mean, there was none of that. So like
mhm,
you could bring somebody in, that
mhm,
may be from who knows where, and they're just incorporated
mhm,
into the group, and onwards and upwards, and that's
mhm.
it. But but the theory is actually that's where it points to. But there's
Well,
other
it's yeah,
people.
it's supported by evidence. So, you know,
When the DNA came out, started coming out, and people started taking their tests, people from England,
mhm,
forgive me, let's say UK broadly, there was a lot of chatter, and I've gone back and looked to see what the mentality is and stuff, and there was a lot of problems because there's certain understandings. One understanding is this issue with Celt.
mhm.
Oh, the Celt are those people further on out in the Isles. They're not. We're a different thing. We're the Saxons, and let's get this clear. And so there was contention with that, and there's still people that are dealing with that because there is a historical concept
Mhm.
that we are the Anglo-Saxons, and the Celts are over there, and there's also, so there's problems like that, and that's found everywhere. Like
Yeah.
India has battles over the situation, so everybody has their battles. Um, but the truth is, you know what? The truth is, the truth is,
It
the
doesn't
truth is,
matter.
no, the truth is that this is, imagine a big bowl, and you know those Martha Stewart,
Hmm.
um, uh, spinny things. that, but there are, it's, it's difficult to say that with our understanding today, and still be able to keep one and the other. I can perfectly keep all of it
Hmm.
without having to throw the baby out with the bathwater. In other words, I can accept,
Hmm.
um, basically whatever comes. Now, I have guanches indigenous in my tree.
Hmm.
I think that's freaking cool,
Yeah.
personally. Um, it's a mystery of how they ended up in the islands and stuff. But this is a departure from what I understood prior.
Yeah.
And yes, it took me a little bit to work it in my, I'm like, wow, what does that mean? But at this point, I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, it's like
It
so it's
is.
weird. It's weird. It's a weird thing because there's social custom ideas, concepts, and whatnot and stuff, and it doesn't necessarily sit well with what we've known in terms of this and that. Um,
Well,
but I'm enjoying it. I
we're
feel that I'm more open. I feel that I'm I feel that I'm more as far I feel that I'm more open to, I don't know how to say it right, but understanding that, I feel
Mhm.
that, like, I mean, I'm more open in terms of certain things that maybe before I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah. Well, you had no reason to think of it. I mean,
Zero reason to even
yeah.
consider.
So, and that was the point that I was trying to make earlier. Your father had less of a reason, and your grandfather had even less of a reason. You
Yeah.
know, so you take the family history that's passed down to you, be it verbal or written, and that's what you have to work with. So why would you question it? You know, I don't know. It's we're all on our own little trip, and we're all on our own little journey. And what
Yeah.
you're talking about with these people rebelling against, results that they get and this, that, and the other, and just have a lot of problems with it. A lot of that is, I think, and I may be wrong here. I don't know what you think about it, but I think people are having trouble coming to grips with a lot of what they've been told, and even a lot of what they were taught in school in a lot of cases
Yeah.
was just erroneous.
Yeah. Good. What I would classify as good people. It's not the only classification.
Sure.
You can you can reject this, that, and everything else, and
Hmm.
still be good in ways that makes no difference whether it's kind of like, I'm just going to throw this out there. It's kind of like somebody with a particular political, you could, a person can have a variation that's not to my liking, but in every other aspect. So we're human beings at the end of the day, so it's
Yeah.
not like, but yes, what you're saying. So what I don't like personally is that there's different people with different of that you're saying, upbringing mentalities, that they wouldn't know either or, but they'll take the DNA thing and use it as a sort of crowbar tool to sneak in today understandings in order to wag fingers at one group or the other. And I don't want to go there, but
Right.
it goes around. I, I'll do a light one for our group, because we're older, so it's not
Hmm.
like we're well, I would have.
Speak for yourself, old man.
I don't want to, but these notions of like, It's the difference between a Pocahontas being played by, I don't know, um, some some beautiful hot like blonde. Wait a second, that doesn't match that. And on the reverse, a Cleopatra being like all these variations that we see.
Mhm.
When people get upset about movies and whatnot, as
Mhm.
if it's the end of the world, that's the level that they're at.
Yeah.
That they see a movie as the point at which the boat will sink, because that is their historical reference. These people, a lot of these people are basically pop culture historical enthusiasts. That's where they get their notions from, as opposed to looking at what is.
But history, what the facts are. Yeah.
So obviously they get pissed on these shots. So they'll use things like DNA
Hmm.
half-assed
Yeah.
in order to arrive at conclusions that actually contradict what the geneticists are saying. And and sometimes they're saying things that don't really that aren't good for any group in the way we think.
Hmm.
A whole bunch of people have been pissed. Like the Basque. The Basque have always been separate,
Hmm.
even before DNA, and many people consider them the originators of of before Europe was Europe and whatnot, in terms of the history that, and many in England point to them as, no, we come from them. Oh yes, they do. In the Iberian, however, there's some truth to that, but you have to go around the block 6 or 5 times. And the fact is that genetically, they're as European as everybody else, and everybody else is them, including their neighbors in Spain. But they have more. They have more of an original European from way back when, as opposed to the different waves that came later. And so they do have this unique marker in that way, but doesn't mean that they are anything different than any other European, which is a mix of all sorts of
Right.
things.
And that's the thing. I think that's the big takeaway that I took from all of this was the fact that there are more differences in culture than there are actual genetic differences in people.
Well,
Because,
okay,
for instance, let's take your R1B example. Genetically speaking, you're very similar to every other R1B in Western Europe.
yeah, just the R1B, yeah,
Right. Whether that R1B is from Germany or France, the Netherlands,
yeah.
but those are cultural differences. Well, that's what I'm getting at. There are more cultural differences than there are actual genetic differences.
It depends on the genetic
And it
that you're
depends on
talking
also
about.
on how far back you're going as well. But
Well, it also depends on the genetic you're talking about.
mhm,
Because if you're talking about, let's use something benign
okay,
to get the same point across, because it can apply to every other thing.
okay,
Hair color.
okay,
The further south you go,
hmm,
on average,
hmm,
which is different than on person to person cases,
sure,
hair color is darker.
right,
The further north you go, the propensity for lighter hair color
hmm,
increases.
right,
Okay. Under the genetic understanding of what this is, and they
okay,
have studied it and continue to, but it is some heavy duty. I mean, they'll look at the frequencies of letters that pair
hmm,
up in genes across the, and if you have two certain letters, it will toss you into having blonde hair or
right,
curly hair or not curly hair or balding. I
right,
have the propensity that comes from my dad for balding,
hmm,
actually.
hmm.
Um, as an
So do
example.
I. So do I.
And and I have what is it, the damn, you threw me when you said, okay, so anyways, but hair color, oh, let me interject, double interject. But It's not that all people with dark hair, brown hair,
Right.
are in the South,
Right. Understood.
nor all people with blonde hair are in the. You can have variation because human beings are just all these combinations anyhow.
Right.
But there's a propensity because people. Well, anyways, that's different understanding on a genetic thing than the concept of a racial thing.
Right. Oh, understood. But
And
what my point was to dovetail into what you're talking about here, as you said, the further south you get, the more prone
mhm,
there is darker hair,
mhm.
maybe darker skin, darker eyes. My point was that while that is true, it would be true not only for Spain, but it would be true for Portugal, for Italy, and for Greece. And there you have four separate cultures with the same genetic propensity. Nothing is guaranteed because you are going to have blondes with blue eyes and all that other good stuff, as you're saying. But what I'm getting at is the cultural differences are more obvious than the genetic differences.
Yeah. So I understood what you said, but I wanted to. But I understood what you said, but there's and this wasn't the example primary example. But why I wanted to say that people in the north,
Mm-hmm.
be it Germany or other places, now it gets the further it's less and less as far as a
Mm-hmm.
variation, but they have dark hair too and dark
Yeah,
eyes and
yeah.
to the point where we've had this discussion before where there's this thing called the Black Irish.
Mm-hmm.
That's so there's two ways at that,
Sure.
but the one way that I'll go is that in fact those people
Mm-hmm.
are as Irish as anybody that doesn't have like
Right.
genetically as
Mm-hmm.
Irish as anybody that doesn't have that is a variation of human that has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with any racial connotation.
Right. Absolutely.
It
Um,
falls under the top. Falls under the category of what is called adaptive traits,
mm-hmm.
and it can vary. So you can have people in the heart of I don't know, um, uh, Cologne, up in
Germany.
yeah, and there you have a baby, and then the baby has all the hair color and whatnot,
Well, I was
skin,
gonna.
eyes, every, and he's perfectly because why? Because it's 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 just but there's
Well,
these degrees. There's these
and
degrees.
again, I was going to make that statement that we have this vision of German people as blonde haired and blue eyed, and that is just not the case. Blonde haired, blue eyed Germans are the minority. The overwhelming majority have darker hair and darker eyes.
Yeah, it can vary. It can vary. And if
Yeah.
you go to Eastern Europe, it can vary. But
Oh, yeah.
there's no
The further east and the further north you get, the more there is a propensity to have lighter colored hair and lighter
yeah.
colored eyes.
Hmm.
But the average German, blonde haired and blue eyed, is a minority.
Now, putting all that aside,
Hmm.
I'll say I can't say, but if I look at myself with my ancestry,
Hmm.
as far as I can go so far,
Hmm.
but then making the leap historically, looking at what there is historically and stuff like that,
Hmm.
there's a whole history of the world and the places that my ancestors beyond where I can know would have been involved in.
Hmm.
So what I'm getting at is this, and let's include the Guanches. I am a person that, as I sit here and by the way, it's not like I'm the only. The problem is that this applies to everybody in different ways. But here's the thing: I'm sitting here and literally, and it can be argued with clearly, but using myself, I'm a person here sitting in Miami, Florida, and if I look at my four great grandparents, they are from Cantabria, Malaga, Canary Islands, Italy, Cuba. Great grandparents, my grandparents born there and then came. So there's a
Hmm.
little variation there, but So I have these four places, and the histories of those different four places, beyond that which I can't go back further,
Mm-hmm.
is implicit in the formation of that. And it includes all people from all other places in different combinations. But locally, I have a different understanding due to my thing. So basically, what I'm getting at is that, you know, and plus the Spanish world, as we know,
Mm-hmm.
was historically, they were okay with none of the things that other places were okay with, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yep.
Um, to their credit,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, to their credit, be it a enslaved person, let's say, you could marry, and the next generation, they were strutting around town.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there was disparaging this and that, but if a person of some sort of mixed heritage had more moolah than the next, let's say, European guy, um, the guy with that mixed heritage and more moolah had preference.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I mean,
that kind of thing.
an economic class system. Yes.
Yeah. So there
Um,
was those variations.
Jim Dockrell says they went to Italy and didn't stay for the food. That's crazy. Even crazier, Jim. They were born in Italy and left. The food wasn't good enough to keep them. I know, right?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild, but
I mean, I'm as white bread as they come, but you put Italian food in front of me, clear the decks, homeboy, because I'm going to make a mess. And I'm talking sit several feet away because I get sloppy. Sauce is oh so good.
what was your Italian name of that branch?
De Taro, way northern Italy. De Taro.
You
The
always say the way northern Italy,
Yeah.
the way north.
Well,
Um,
that's because that's what it is. I mean, I'm almost Austria, so Tyrolean.
so it's basically Austrian, not Italian. See, the Italy was
Yeah.
um,
Well,
that's wild.
on the southern side of the Alps, but Tyrolean Alps, the Tyrolean region on the southern side of the Alps, well in modern day Italy. And I can't remember the name of the region. My grandmother knew all this stuff. I don't remember it, but I need to really get back into it and research it. But yeah, over the years, their name was anglicized more and anglicized even more, and it became Tethero. I don't know when, I don't know where, but its root was Ditero.
In the Italian history of them traveling to the Americas,
Mm-hmm.
that happened a lot. Mainly, or in part, because the people registering them as they got off the boats and whatnot
Mm-hmm.
had no freaking idea what the hell they were
Had
saying.
no idea how to, and I got a lesson in that when I was in the army because there was a guy. He wasn't in my platoon; he was in another platoon, but his last name was Deutsch, and I said something about his name, and well, that just means German, doesn't it? And he said, yeah, when his family came through Ellis Island, nobody could pronounce or spell his last name. So it was in German, they just put Deutsch. And that's the last name that the family has had ever since.
That's incredible.
And that happened quite a bit. You got to remember a lot of these people when they came either couldn't read or write or they couldn't speak English, a good percentage of them, and they were communicating in various ways. If they could read or write, they could put down their name. But if they couldn't, they were at the mercy of the person who was talking to them, trying to, you know, record their entrance.
Well, they
So,
came. They came. They came. So So from an American, this is the problem too. From an American standpoint, if they do have that understanding of
mhm,
history to that degree,
mhm,
they remember Ellis Island. Of course, they
mhm,
would. For the ones that do, the ones that don't, they don't. I mean, there's some videos out there, and I'm sure you can find that in a population of 340 million people plus.
mhm.
But there's videos out there where they ask kids today Um, like, I don't know, when was the Civil War? Or who did we fight
But
the
yeah,
Revolutionary War against? Or just any number of things. Now, I could imagine that they pick the dumbest answers, people answering, because that's what
oh
makes
yeah,
great
because
clicks.
that's for the clicks. Yeah.
Because I could not imagine myself. I mean, I could imagine it, which is sad, but I could not imagine if I were to take a little microphone and go around and ask the question, that more people would answer incorrectly like I can't. So it has to be that they're picking the most crazy ones, in my
Well,
opinion.
yeah, yeah, and that's and I don't think they make any secret of that fact. You know, I tend to not watch those videos because that's a real quick way for me to lose faith in humanity. You know, but the ones I have seen, it's like, you know, you mean to tell me how long were you out there? You must have been out there for hours, and you just pick and chose, you know, because there's no way the majority of people didn't know the answer to most of these
They
questions. Not everybody's perfect,
they
but
pick some
yeah.
whoppers.
Oh, I know they do, but you know, those are the ones that are going to generate the clicks. Those are the ones that are going to generate the views. So of course they're going to put them out there.
Well, that's what I assume, but beyond that, I feel confident that just like people would know roughly, with exceptions, um, the Ellis Island travel from
Hmm.
Italy. What they generally would not know is that that similar travel did not occur just in Italy. It occurred in the Caribbean. It
Oh
occurred
yeah, it was all over the place.
it occurred towards Mexico. It
Hmm.
occurred towards Central and South America.
Hmm.
Um, it occurred into the Americas, and to this day, there's Italian heritage all across the. I mean, a good example, not alone, but the highest example of the most amount is Argentina.
Hmm.
They have their language was shaped by it, so they speak Spanish with an Italian variation to it.
Hmm. And
As an
it
example.
and you get a little bit further south into, or no, actually further north into Brazil, they speak Portuguese.
Yeah, exactly.
So you know, yeah,
And
I mean,
they become they become Brazilians, and they become Argentinians and stuff. And so
mhm,
and so that well, that's how Italian got to me, is through that journey into
mhm.
Cuba.
But then you get a monkey wrench thrown into the works, and you go across the other side of the continent over on the Pacific side, where you have regions in Chile, of all places, of Polynesians.
Yeah.
From when the Tuitonga colonization of the Pacific Islands, a lot of them ended up in what is now South America.
Yeah.
The Easter Island, the Rapa Nui, the DNA analysis done there has shown that there is Polynesian there too.
Yeah.
So when you ask how did these people get to the Canary Islands, nobody knows. Well, the same way that people got to all the other Pacific islands, you know, maybe they were different people coming in a different direction, but they came from somewhere.
Well, yeah, they had to come
So,
from somewhere.
you know, yeah, nobody just sprouted right, you know, right. Here's Ireland. Plunk. We are a
So,
nation of redheads who love beer. No, that's
some
not
of
how
our
it works.
some of our founding fathers were born and lived in the Caribbean,
Hmm.
and then they traveled up to
Hmm.
um, uh, from England,
Yep.
but they
And
made other journeys. So there's a lot of variation on a historical note, but along the way, they pick up marriages and wives and children
mhm.
that are a culmination of the locations and stuff. So it's a little bit of that to do, but
Well, back to the topic of the last names for just a brief second. I've seen that in my own family tree because a lot of these people were subsistence farmers who just didn't put any importance on education. My great grandfather, my grandfather's dad, made it to sixth grade, and his dad said, "That's enough. You're old enough to work on the farm. You know how to read and write and count. That's good enough." So he never went beyond the sixth grade. A lot of these people could not read or write. So the way the name was spelled was down to the guy writing their name down on the census.
Yeah.
And you might see it spelled one way in this census and another way in this census, and then back to another way in this census. I've seen our family name spelled three different ways based on the fact that the people writing the name down were census takers, and the people who were that they were writing about didn't know how to spell their own last name. So,
If it's in the 1900s
mhm.
or the 1800s, there's a higher chance that a name will be spelled, higher chance, not complete, but higher chance that a name will be spelled the same. But if you get into the 1700s, 1600s, and maybe further into the 15, 17,
Six,
16, 15, then the scribes locally, the um, pastors or priests or notaries and such, the languages had certain letters and certain things that they'd spell that were implied in a phonetic direction as
yeah,
opposed to a standardized this is how it's done.
yeah, there were a little bit more standardization, but not 100%.
Right.
And the variations I'm talking about happened between the late 1700s and about the 1860s. So up into well into the mid 1800s, the variations were there. It just depends on who was writing down the names, because these people couldn't read or write. They didn't see it as important. We have the Revolutionary War documents for my five times great grandfather. He collected a Revolutionary War pension of $91 a year, which was a lot of money back then. But he signed it with an X. And there were two witnesses who could read and write who witnessed him signing it. And but he couldn't read or write. He knew what his name was, but he couldn't spell it. So he was listed as under two different names, under just depending upon which census you want to look at. But we know it's the same person based on the other people within the household.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, people, there was a different world
mhm.
than what we have now. And if you think about just that, you could make the argument that, well, we have to tread lightly, but you can make the argument because it could get, um, well, actually, for some people, it would be completely easy to make this argument, but I have to be careful because I have a different understand or a slight different understanding. But the education has been a great idea because people across the board, roughly, can read and write today.
Mhm.
And that's just gone up in a trajectory. But back 100, 200, 300 years ago, like we've said before, that wasn't necessarily a main. It was something that, well, you need this just to get by, to verify, or to enter into a contract or something. And then some people had that
Mhm.
ability. So I get that. Um, so we have gone up in that in that direction due to education.
And you also have other directions that you wouldn't expect things to come from. For instance, my grandfather, my it was my mom's stepfather. He wasn't her blood father. Her real father died. He died in an accident, and grandma later remarried several years later. Um, his family, there was a split in the family. There was a family feud, if you will, and it was his grandfather changed the spelling of their last name. It was Simmons, and up till that split, it was Simmons. He added a D, Simmonds, and the whole line after that was spelled that way. And that was to separate him from the other side of the family. Now, I don't know what was the cause of the split. It was right around the time of the Civil War. So, gee, I wonder what that implies.
It could.
But there was that split. I gotta take a break here for just 1 second and say, hiya back.
Yeah.
Um, you may have noticed, folks over here in the chat, that Linda has been absent. She's not here. She's up in, well, not in, but she's up near Seattle,
Whoa.
attending a school right now for bagpiping. And we talk on the phone and what have you. But she's been away since, see, they left Sunday morning, and she'll be back next Sunday. So I'm here batching it. And yes, the chuck roast was good. Not as good as the other one, but it was good. So
Awesome.
I'm playing Mr. Bachelor, and I'm cooking my own dinner. And I forgot how much I love cooking, but what can I say?
Freaking awesome.
So, oh man,
And you can still hear the bagpipes right from where you're at.
almost, almost.
Wait a second. Wait. That wind from the north is blowing the sounds of that bagpipe.
Hmm. I hear a trailing drone. Oh, somebody, there's an early E. Anyway, bagpipe life. Um, Steve says, careful, Linda, the further north you go, the less the brain works. Well, but what can you say? So, yeah. Hi. What were we on? Oh, we were on about family names and what have you. But you also
Yep.
had adoptions, and you also had various and so, and you also had changes in, um, terminology and changes in vocabulary. Like, for instance, um, during the 1700s, a common phrase for a person who was adopted was in-law. So if you had a son-in-law, he wasn't the person that married your daughter. He was your adopted son. He was your son-in-law. So that has confused a number of people. I found that in my family tree, where you have people with two different last names, but they're called son-in-law, but no, they're not
They're not
son-in-law
married
like
to.
we would think of, you know.
Right. They're basically adopted.
Yeah, pretty much. So, okay, everybody else is it? They call it mashed bands. We call it massed bands. It's where everybody with pipes is out there playing at once. I bet the neighbors love this place right about now. The
The roof.
biggest.
The roof is on fire.
This is what I'm talking about when I say bagpipe life. The biggest massed bands, biggest collection of bands I've ever seen personally, ever witnessed personally, was at a Highland Games down in Pleasanton, California. This must have been 2003, 2004, something like that. And every band performing at this Highland Games all got together for the closing ceremonies on the last day, and they played a selection of tunes that every bagpiper is required basically to know. Scotland the Brave, Amazing Grace, and everything else. And there were, when you add up all the bagpipers, you add up all the drummers, there were over 700 musicians out there on that field. And you want to talk about being impressive. Man, it was something. It shook the stands. I'm sitting up in the stands watching with Linda because she wasn't in a band at the time. But it was impressive. It's really something.
Okay, I'll throw this in. There is some association to. I think there is to Scotland. Let me see if there is.
If it's
I mean,
not
it's gonna
Scottish,
be.
it's crap.
It would be a loose association. Actually, it doesn't have association to Scotland. Oh well. This is just a slight story, but I'll throw it in. So Philip II, King of Spain, He was
Mhm.
called Philip II the Prudent.
Okay.
He was the king of Spain. He was the king of Portugal.
Mhm.
He was the king of Naples and Sicily.
Mhm.
And he was the king of England and Ireland during his marriage to Queen Mary I of England.
Okay.
And he was lord of the 17 provinces of the Netherlands. We're talking
And
Habsburg here.
oh yeah, the family
So
that married into so many families, they had to start marrying one another. Yeah.
yeah, he basically they owned everything.
Mhm.
When that broke off, that marriage, when that ended, and the follow up came in England, um, due to Catholicism, because remember the issue was in part Catholicism and Protestantism. There was all to do, but this is not about that. That's who this guy was. His architect
Mhm.
was Juan de Herrera,
Mhm.
or Juan the locksmith,
Okay.
and he was born in Maliaño, Santander province, Cantabria, Spain,
Mhm.
in the town where my grandfather was born,
Okay.
where my great grandfather was born, where my where his great grandmother was, and so on and so forth. Um, but in the 1500s, the person there was Juan de Herrera, and he was the architect for Philip, the king,
Mhm.
and he was commissioned to do this huge palatial thing in Madrid,
Mhm.
which he did. And in his will, he wrote, "And when I die, I want that my monies that was kept in the bank, a percentage that incurs interest, because all that existed way back when.
Yeah.
The idea that there's a lot of things that are, anyways,
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff existed back then. Like people had money and they had banks and there was things going on for way longer than, but and it's verifiable.
Mhm.
Um, if one looks at historical documents and believes that but in his will he said, and I want a percentage of that to go to the, I think I'm paraphrasing here, to the 10 families with the most poverty in the town,
Mhm.
or people with the like something like that, in a perpetual way. So there's an account in perpetuity
Mhm.
that would select, like the municipality or whatnot would select and give the money to, just enough to do what they have to do. Well, and he also wrote in his will that when he died, he wanted his remains to be taken back north and
Mhm.
buried in Maliaño. And he's a big deal in Spain. He
Mhm.
built this huge palace that is pretty savage, El Escorial. Um, and he was buried, but across the centuries, his gravesite was lost, forgotten.
Okay.
And in the 1800s, my great granduncle, Mateo Escajedo Samon,
Mhm.
as a young boy with other intellectuals of his time, he was studying for the priesthood, but had an interest in history, genealogy, and so forth. In the long, cold winters in Cantabria, Spain, where it snows, a lot of people, it's climactic in such a way, although it's temperate too. The lower you get, like up in the, kind of like California, there's a thing like Bear Mountain in California, and like it's snow. It's kind of like
Yeah.
but it's colder up there. They would gather around discussing, brainstorming, where the heck were the remains?
Yeah.
Where were the remains of Juan de Herrera? This figure that's important to history and such and this and that. And they would discuss all night, smoking pipes and the whole thing. In 1951, after my great granduncle had passed away, finally, they discovered the remains of Juan de Herrera, along with his wife, his family, like all of them, buried at the church. They were remodeling the church and they
Hmm.
found the gravesites.
Oh,
And so
geez.
today, yeah, and so today sits a you know
A marker, a memorial.
marker memorial thing for him and stuff. Um, but you see how those connections go. Like you have this king of great
Hmm.
import, um, that has power across Europe, um, and there's a connection to it in the little town where my grandfather was born. I'm not suggesting that we have any. I'm just saying that
Yeah,
in a
understood. Understood.
right, yeah,
You got off onto a small topic kind of side, and then you went right back into the pocket of where you were going. You were talking about banks and
which is rare, which is
setting
rare.
up accounts and this, that, and the other that is still paying interest and what have you.
Yeah,
There's another example of that in England, where they basically, um, a way to take care of orphan children or just children that parents could not take care of. And that was a foundling hospital in London that was founded in, let's see here, it was founded in 1739 by a sea captain named Thomas Coram and the uh, composer George Handel, George Friedrich Handel. You know,
yeah.
Handel's Messiah that's played
I,
Christmas. Hallelujah.
I had his two set CD.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
I'm weird like that.
no, 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 that's cool. That's cool. Um, that was set up as, like I said, they called it a children's asylum, basically. And the word hospital was used more in a general sense. They did, they did treat illnesses and what have you, but it was mainly an orphanage for kids. And as a part of setting up this orphanage, they made some very shrewd investments with some bankers at the time and set money aside in various accounts to help run the orphanage. And as it made a little bit more money, some of this was kept in there. And as the foundling hospital was deemed basically obsolete, they had other things going on. The government took over certain portions of it, and they created, um, you know, um, um, orphanages and what have you. But these accounts are still there with banks that are still active. And the overseers of these accounts now, it's contributed to charities, and these accounts are still creating a good percentage of wealth, and these contributions to various children's charities, and that's what it was all set up for. It all goes to children's charities. It's been a pretty lucrative thing for these children's charities. But it's amazing to think that accounts that were set up in like the 1730s and 1740s would still be generating interest, so much so that it could be paid out to these other charities.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing, actually.
It's wild as heck.
Yeah, they had in certain ways. I always like this topic because we touch on it every now and then for a reason. But yes, I understand we have computers and 159 channels plus
Mm-hmm.
and all the nice and goodies that we can get of modern life. But I hate to also dismiss all the things that just tagged along into our present time uh, as things that we came up with recently when it's actually something that, you know what I'm saying? Like the
Yeah,
long draw of history. I kind of like giving, trying to give credit, you know what I'm saying, to the
I
past.
do. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's worthless.
Right.
You know, it's old for a reason, because it worked. We here in America, well, over in the UK, the saying is, um, Americans think 100 years is old, and no, Americans think 100 years is a long time, and Brits think 100 miles is a long way.
Yeah.
Now, everything is relative, so depending upon who you are and where you were raised, both could be true. But when you go back and you look at some of these institutions that are, I mean, that those accounts are 300 years old. I mean, it's amazing that any business has stayed in operation for 300 years. And these are not the oldest businesses. There are businesses. When Linda and I were in Germany, it was a big thing. They had a big, huge celebration about it on TV. Their post office celebrated its 800th anniversary. 800 years. We can't even conceive of that amount of time, you know?
We
So,
didn't grow up around antiquity
mhm,
like these Europeans do.
right.
But
And
in all fair, go ahead.
well, and that was my point, that not growing up in antiquity, we are of the mindset that, well, if it's 60 years or 70 years old, it's time to tear it down and build a new one. Whereas there are houses people are living in today over there that are 1,000 years old. You
Look,
know,
I know it's not. It's a far gone conclusion at this point, but this is a what if. Granted, everything you just said, I don't disagree with it because it's true. Or just because I say it's true doesn't. But it's as like as clear as
yeah.
day. So I agree with it wholeheartedly. But now, a what if? What if when folks from the old world came to the new, this is just a what if.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, and I get the drawback, I understand the drawbacks. I'm just pretending here.
Okay.
What if they built, as opposed to with lumber, they went
Mm-hmm.
hog wild and created an American version of European? I know there's all different, but my point is, imagine you and I and the rest of us here, instead of walking through our in a minute up, in a minute down districts and byways, we had these iconic structures that, sure enough, are 250 some odd years old, roughly thereabouts. But a skyline or a neighborhoods across America that had these things that we could look and see. I mean, there are some, I get it. But imagine if that was just the thinking. And
It,
now us had the pleasure of saying, damn, that house, 250. I know it's still young, but you get the point. That's
I
my
do get the point. And there is, I mean, I'm sure you can ask Dan. Dan is still out here in the chat, and I'm not ignoring your comment, Dan. I'm going to throw it out here in just a minute. I'm sure Dan could lead you around the East Coast and point to all kinds of buildings that were made of stone in the European style. But what it came down to was resources. You know,
like I know.
lumber was so plentiful. And then you get out on the plains or you get out here on the West, lumber is just so plentiful. There is just so much of it. We
Could
got
you
to get this sucker built now. We can't
and
take 5 years to build a castle.
could you imagine me? Could you? But in my what if, in the middle of like some sort of prairie,
Mm-hmm.
there's this huge castle for no reason whatsoever, just sitting there in my mind. That would be so cool because you could drive. You're driving. Hey, let's go to Oklahoma, and as you're driving, there's this huge freaking
I
castle.
have a I have a homework assignment for you. Look up the castle in Death Valley.
Okay.
It exists. Or maybe it's, for all I know, it may have burned down a couple of years ago, but there are people who build castles. You told me about a coral house, a coral castle
Yeah,
there
but
locally. But yeah, that was one guy. But there are European style castles here and there, higgledy piggledy around the country. But there were a bunch of people coming in all over the place. They needed shelter right stinking now, mister. And wood was quick.
when you look at there is something quite very American that people recognize as American
Hmm.
that we do not outright we know it, but it's not like it sticks out to us necessarily. And there's many of it online. You can go on Facebook and there's plenty of freaking, and they're awesome. I spent a lot of time just thumbing through old
Hmm.
American photographs,
Yep.
and it could be something as simple as a lady with her child, a little grocery cart in an old 1950s or 40s grocery store, or it could be a freaking ice cream shop and looking at the environment in that photograph and its surroundings and such and this and that. And the let's build it now and get these people in
Hmm.
aspect of it,
Hmm.
even though it's endearing to us right now, and it was probably back then, obviously, but it was an immediate let's get this sucker
Yeah.
running so we can make and so there's a concept there floating around
Hmm.
that's unique to America that we can't let go of.
Yeah.
I'm not saying because we would want to or not. I'm saying that it's embedded in you and
Yeah.
I and the rest of us.
It is now. Back then, it was a necessity. Now it's kind of a cute little curiosity kind of a thing. But yeah, there obviously there were buildings in the bigger cities, especially. You can go into Philadelphia and Boston and New York, and you can find homes that were built in the 1700s. You can find the big buildings and big businesses that were built in the 1700s, and they're made of stone in kind of a European style. But that came along after the board shanties that they were put up just to get people into these places and get out of the rain. When your family happens upon a piece of land that you can claim, you can file a patent for, and you can claim it. All right, great. We're going to live in a tent for the first year, and now we're going to build our house, and it's going to be this, board shanty, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll get a window with real glass in it. Odds are you won't, but maybe if you're lucky, we'll have enough money to do that. And that was all over the place. I mean, there were people out on the plains that would literally take tumbleweed and crush it down, compact it into bales, and build with that because that's all there was. There were no trees out there. So you have to build with what you can build with. You can look up plains sod houses and you'll see, I mean, it's dug half into the ground and you're talking dirt floors and they just piling clumps, blocks of sod on top of one another. And eventually maybe they can get a hold of a little bit of lumber and build an actual board roof. But if you're working your way across the plains of this country and your wagon broke down and you were too dumb or too lazy to fix it, that's where you stayed. There was no AAA to come tow you off somewhere.
Mhm.
So you have to get in out of the weather. You got to get in out of the weather. Now,
Yeah, you
Rick,
were literally in the wilderness.
yeah, exactly. There was nothing. Ain't
You
no
were
7-Eleven,
literally
homeboy.
you were literally in the wilderness. Like there's no
Yeah.
like right now if I think of like Oklahoma, yeah,
Hmm.
I can picture open and rolling. I can picture, but I know there's a road that leads to a gas station somewhere,
Yeah.
and that makes all the difference.
Yeah. You can go out and you can see the wagon train ruts and all this other stuff, but still go have lunch at Arby's. Yeah. They didn't have that luxury, man.
Right. So and that's a big
Um,
difference.
Huge difference. Rick French said he visited the castle in Death Valley about 10 years ago. So, okay, it was there 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean,
I will take exception to one thing.
what's that?
Not that you've said,
Mhm.
but to something that I thought when you were I ran across and it was super cool. I ran across not a week or two ago
Mhm.
the oldest neighborhood or street in the United States of America,
Mhm.
located, according to them,
Mhm.
in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia.
Mhm.
And I went and I explored it, and it was freaking awesome.
Mhm.
Um, like the houses, like it's really freaking awesome.
Mhm.
No problem. And as far as I enjoyed it. But I thought to myself, well, wait a second. Tisk, 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 wait a second. And there's workarounds, but I thought it and I'm sharing it now. The oldest anything concerning city or town is St. Augustine, Florida, bar none, in terms of European whatnot.
I was
Not
going to say, none of those people ever heard of Cahokia.
right. But we're talking about,
Yeah,
well,
European.
yeah, European. And I said, well, how could they say that? And then the only workaround that I could figure was that Florida later became part of the United States. It was a territory then. But if you include US as it is today,
Mm-hmm.
the oldest anything in terms of that is St. Augustine, Florida.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. There's no tunneling down to get out the other way, hedgehog through the no. But how did they work around it? I didn't find the answer, but I worked one in my head thinking, well, considering the 13 colonies, but the narrative is screwed up slightly.
Yeah, because I mean, you know,
There was 15 colonies, by the way. We're not going to work that one in. They came late because England took Florida.
well,
And when they took Florida, they incorporated East and West Florida as part of. They were colonies, but they weren't colonies in the sense that
they
the
weren't the
problem.
original colonies that the
Right,
English settled. They were
right,
Spanish settlements. Yeah.
right. So you can work it, but after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
America as it stands today, if you had to make a claim of that, but I could see how they would work it around in that fashion that you just said.
Yeah. Well, that's
Whatever.
the oldest in the original 13 colonies.
Right.
We won't even talk about St. Augustine, Florida. Yeah. And again, that's almost misinformation. It depends on how you word it. If they say the oldest neighborhood and the oldest street in the 13 original colonies, okay, that's
Then
true.
yes.
But like Linda just points out, Santa Fe, New Mexico was 25 years old when the Pilgrims landed.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, that's what I was talking about, Dan, when there are pueblos down in Arizona and New Mexico that are older than that. And then Cahokia in back in the Midwest was a city of, they estimate, somewhere between 20 and 25,000 people that was in existence 500 years before London became a thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it did. What do you want to call a city? Now, no, they didn't have Model Ts and they weren't driving around honk, honk, milkman. But when you've got that many people there, I don't know what you'd call it other than a city.
Well,
So,
well. So if you remove the boundary of accounting for Europe,
mm-hmm.
then we can go in that direction, and obviously,
Yeah,
this was the land
mm-hmm.
of what we call the Native Americans, Indians,
Mm-hmm.
indigenous people to this land.
Sure.
But look, I will say that just that mentioning,
mm-hmm.
and the fact that we're always sitting in a different place. You and I are always sitting, and all of us here, although Dan did bring that up, and some other folks, but we usually, what do? What is our perspective? Is not our perspective a European perspective, Mr. Lindsay? Is it not? I'm not
Sure.
saying wholehearted. Well, yeah, I'm saying our perspective and our history. Are we starting it from the Native Americans ourselves? No. What are we starting it from? We're starting everything when we talk. We're quite literally in the camp, well placed, of a European view
And
of the beginning of things. And why is that? You know why? Because why? I know
and
why.
and then again, you have to get back into how they addressed it and how they presented it. If they're talking about the original 13 colonies and they word it that way, then maybe they're right. But if they say North America, sorry, they're just wrong.
If they say North America, there's no way around it. If they say the or original 13 colonies, then that's the escape.
Yeah.
If they say United States and period, then they're also incorrect.
Mm,
Um, because there's a history to United States.
sure.
Um, and
There's a
so
history
there's
to North America, you know.
right. But
So,
my point was within all that, Mark,
mhm.
is that if you had to pick from A, B, C, D, and whatever, is your outlook not your surely we're American, obviously, but
Mhm.
isn't it isn't it European derived?
Some of it is, some of it isn't. But then I have that Native American ancestry too. So I have to kind of think about, wait a minute, which is why I was so quick to bring up Cahokia. Because having that Native American ancestry, I'm not militant about it or anything like that,
But you know, it's you're
but
aware
I
of it.
can see where a lot of people make that jump to automatically coming from a Eurocentric
Well,
attitude.
I don't have that perspective
Yeah,
or
no, you
history.
don't, and why would you? So,
I don't have that indigenous perspective. Now,
mhm.
I do have
In the Canary Islands,
in the
yes.
Canary Islands, but
Mhm,
that's more of a North African
mhm.
population or originating in that. So I have that,
Yeah,
but I'm like you. I mean, can I say, oh, those darn French? No, the French also populated. Like I have people that I could trace. Can the Italian? No, I can't say. I can't say the. Can I say that? I can't on the virtue of one group or this or that. I can't. You understand the problem?
I do. Yeah,
I
and
can't fight people based on you unless I'm joking.
sure, yeah, we all do.
Unless I'm joking, just as a.
Hmm.
But other than that, I can't. Now I can over ideas. I can over ideas. That's different.
I don't know if it ruffled his feathers as much as I thought it did, but occasionally our buddy Doc Hildebrand, who Doc, if you're listening to this later on, reach out, man, miss you, dude.
What happened?
Oh, it wasn't a big thing, but when we would get in our hangouts and I would talk about a little bit of my Italian heritage and everything, I'd be like, "Hey, I'm a paisan. I can talk like that." And he didn't ruffle his feathers, but you could see him look at me kind of crossways, like, "What are you doing? Knock it off," you know.
Oh, because you were mixing in terminology with something
Yeah,
else.
yeah, and just kind of kind of needle him. It was kind of like a poke. You're just trying to get your attention here, Dan or Doc.
But what was the thing about the paisan? And where would
Oh,
the
I would say something like that. Yeah, because I my grandmother, she's her ancestry is in Italy, so I'm a little Italian too.
oh,
So
I see.
yeah.
It's unfortunate that there are people that like there was this lady like I told you about it. Um,
Hmm.
she went on a thread
Hmm.
and she said, "I just discovered I'm point something percent. I don't know what it was. It could have been indigenous to something or something or other. Can I?" And then she asked the question, "Can I? Is it okay for me to claim that heritage now?" And I just when I read that, I
Yeah.
the cringiness of it.
Yeah. Yeah. But what that was friends BSing with friends.
Yeah.
So there's a
Well, that's different.
complete difference there,
No, that's different. I'm not, but I'm
Yeah.
saying that there's people that are serious about that.
Oh, I know. And that is a case of, okay, get over yourself. Come on.
Do you think I could? I just discovered I'm 0.5% something or other. Do you think that I could now claim without offending others that I too am part of that? Can I get a consensus? I mean, that kind of thing is like, oh, please, no, no.
You're looking for approval from a bunch of people you don't know. What does that mean? To me, it means you're pretty crass and shallow. But, what do I know? I may be wrong. Dan just popped in and said the oldest European home still standing is in Massachusetts from 1637. And I'm betting you the wallpaper needs to be redone. I'll bet you
Is
that.
is Is that the oldest there? Is it
Well, that's according to Dan, and he lives there. I don't.
in
So I
Massachusetts? No,
so
no,
I
I'm
have
not.
no reason to question it.
Well, if you think of 1637,
Yeah,
it's been hanging
almost
on.
400 years ago.
It's been hanging on pretty good.
Hmm.
I would love see. That's one thing that I would. And by the way, Massachusetts is freaking. As far as the scenery, I've never been, but boy, that it's got some history.
He said there's some older in Florida, so I don't get that. Okay.
No, because it said in Massachusetts.
Well, no, it says here the oldest European home still standing is in Massachusetts from 1637.
Oh,
Then he's saying he doesn't agree with that because there are some older in Florida. And
well,
and
people don't.
and also we got to split hairs. What do you classify as a road? If they mean a paved street, then okay, maybe now we can talk about it. But do footpaths count as roads? I mean, you've got a footpath going from point A to point B that has been used for hundreds of years. And this is just the route to get from this place where we hunt this animal to this source of water. Does that count as a road? You
If
know?
they were to reword what Harju just explained to us
Mm-hmm.
by saying in the 13 colony original 13 or something to that
Mm-hmm.
effect that qualifies it within, because the problem is this, in my understanding,
Mm-hmm.
dignity towards your future progenitors, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to say, demands, in my opinion, that the truth be put squarely up front, so that others, because what happens is that you don't want your descendants and your descendants believing a bunch of hogwash, that then somebody else comes,
Yes.
maybe a guy with a beret and a French, checkered thing with a cigarette, and he says, "Excuse me, I do not think so,
Yeah.
my
Well,
silly American." What the more dignified thing to do, in my opinion, is to display calamity, historical calamity, along with historical triumph, because in that story encompasses the wonder of the human experience. We do come packed in with crappy situations that happen,
yeah.
but let's not lie.
No, you got to
Or
take it with the good or bad, and you know
yeah,
you have to take it with the good and bad. Okay, now Dan's doing some research here. His Google foo is working. He says at first he said, "Nah, there's some older in Florida, so I don't get that." Then he says, "Wait, no, they dismantled the Florida one. St. Augustine is a bit younger than Massachusetts now. The oldest building in St. Augustine is showing as 1695 or
oh,
home." Okay.
that could that could very well. I'd have to, what did he further said?
So he's saying the oldest European home still standing is in Massachusetts, 1637. So now they're showing the oldest home in St. Augustine is 1695.
Now my question would be, what I would do to make sure,
Mm-hmm.
well, to make sure in this reme in this
Mm-hmm.
softball way of looking at it, because the real way would be to sit there and then start to comb the. We're not doing that.
No.
Um, we're more or less in this
Yeah.
situation. But what I would do is I'd go to the St. Augustine site,
Mm-hmm.
because they have their own thing, and I have visited, but I don't remember now. And this is a curveball, really. And look at what they say. And if there's a conflict with Massachusetts, well, let me just say
But
this. Well, go ahead.
but you also have to look at what they're saying. Home, the oldest home, which is different from a city building or a trading post or something like that. St. Augustine, yes, that is the oldest city in oldest European city in the U.S. It was
Continuous
in the
occupied.
15. I want to say the 1500s, wasn't it?
I'd have to look, but it was
For,
definitely the 1500s.
for some reason, 1544 is sticking in my brain, and I don't know why. That may be completely off base,
It
but
sounds reasonable. I think it
mhm,
sounds reasonable. It could be
mhm.
earlier. For some
Now,
reason, 1529 pops into
okay,
my brain, but
okay,
I don't know
okay,
that that's true. I'd have to
okay.
actually verify.
Yeah, I'm not. Now, they also said in that video you're talking about the oldest neighborhood. One building isn't a neighborhood. So maybe that's where they got that from.
Well,
Also,
no,
did they say oldest surviving neighborhood?
no, there's a row, and it's
Mhm,
super freaking old, and it's
mhm.
awesome. I mean, it's very quaint. It
Oh,
looks
okay.
like when something out of The Hobbit.
Hmm.
Not really, but yes.
Hmm.
It almost feels like you could see people walking. You could imagine people walking around with the way they dressed back in the 1700s and whatnot.
Okay, Dan says Philadelphia Elfreth's Alley dates back to 1703. I think that's where you went, Eloy.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Actually,
So
I remember the name. You're right. That's exactly the one.
so maybe that's the oldest neighborhood, meaning more than one building that people lived in, more than one
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it all depends on how you want to equivocate, you know, and how you want to phrase things.
The oldest St. Patrick's Day held in the
Hmm.
United States
Hmm.
was also in St. Augustine, Florida. Let me qualify that because the way I said it would make it, well, it would still make it right if we're talking about the United States complete now.
Hmm.
But when St. Augustine was just basically part of Spanish Florida,
Hmm.
there were priests there. The
Hmm.
Spanish and the Irish um, were basically
Man.
buddy buddy,
Hmm.
in terms of they sought asylum and they went to Spain. They entered into their colleges. They even built colleges for them. They went into their military. They
Hmm.
married. So basically the Irish blended in because, frankly, um, they had the same religion,
Hmm.
and the English weren't down with that necessarily.
Well, because thank you, Henry VIII.
Yeah. Well, the first St. Patrick's Day was held, and it's documented in St. Augustine, Florida, in Spanish Florida.
Hmm.
But then I think someone up north, because there's a place that really holds the history of the Irish. When
Hmm.
these documents were brought forth, maybe 20 years ago or something like that,
Hmm.
um, they were like, "Oh well, crap, that can't be," and they did a little fighting. But in the end, they said, "Oh, okay, well, fine." Like, not everybody knows, but the officials that went back and forth with this issue,
Hmm.
at the end, they were like, "Oh, okay, well, and but there was
Well,
it was a kind back and forth, not a
yeah.
rambunctious, evil, type of
Well,
thing."
St. Patrick was important to more than just the Irish. St. Patrick was a saint. So now,
Yeah,
yes, he was the patron saint of Ireland,
yeah.
but that's not all. So, you know,
The,
uh,
the
Dan
Irish were.
says, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Dan says, before Jamestown or the Plymouth colony, the oldest permanent European settlement in what is now the U.S. was founded in September 1565 in St. Augustine, Florida. So we were both wrong. 1565. I knew it was 1500s by Godfrey.
Well, yeah. So, well, there it goes. Um, so I mean, oh, so I was gonna say that that the
St.
the
Patrick.
no the notions of the Irish and
Hmm.
the so if you ask a typical American now of Irish descent or stuff, they probably would not. I don't know this is true because I'm not asking
Hmm.
everybody in a census. I'm just saying that what I've seen as far as they don't make these connections as something that would even exist. But it was such the confidence that they held the highest positions in the military and in politics to the extent that
Hmm.
one of them of Irish ancestry was the frickin' general and governor of Spanish Louisiana, as well as Cuba, and there was no issue, no question. It was simply part of the Spanish Empire's lineup of people. There was no qualification in terms of this and that. They were just simply
Mhm.
part of the gang.
For many, many, many years, up into the 1960s, 70s, and I can remember them talking about this in the 80s and 90s. Law enforcement was overwhelmingly Irish
Yeah,
throughout this country. The FBI was seen as an Irish um, division of the government,
yeah,
and think about in pop culture from back in the day, you had, Officer O'Malley, and even in Billy Joel's song, Moving Out, Sergeant O'Leary is walking the beat. It's an Irish cop.
yeah.
That was the stereotype, so I mean,
But all that blended into the American experience.
yeah.
But even the ramifications of different people and what. And by the way, as far as I always say it, I can't make judgment calls on human beings today by anything that I may or may not like or dislike in history,
Nope.
and basing human beings today of whatever background.
You
I
have
will I will base it on their individual the way they comport themselves
you have to
on an
take it
individual,
by person. You have to.
right. But as far as in terms of, because I mean there's historically you could throw dog crap at so many different groups of people, and the British, and I mean, for goodness sakes, they were an empire,
Hmm.
and so there's a lot of people that aren't too happy with the historical sense of it. But to I mean, for goodness sakes, you can't find a better person as an example. And although this is anecdotal, but let's say as a Jimmy Page,
Hmm.
I have nothing but affection for, and he could be in one moment, I'm not that he is, but let's say he could one moment be um an angry, person one moment, and upset about one thing, or maybe happy that none of that matters. What matters is that, boy, so you can't. And are you going to attach Jamie Page? You know what, Jamie Page? 700 years ago, some ancestor of yours was a Viking, and that Viking, unbeknownst to him, and probably many of them were Anglo-Saxon. Let's not slap the guy around. But one of them would have been and that Viking went a hunting and a stomping and a romping, my friend. And I'm holding you accountable, you son of a gun. I mean, can you imagine?
Quite easily.
No, actually, you're right. You're
Quite
right.
easily.
Well, no, actually, you're right. But that's far fetched because it's 500, 600, 800 years. But you can't even do that from father to son,
Nope.
in my opinion,
No.
or from
Well, that's
grandfather,
that's
or
what
from
I
great.
mean. That's what I mean when I say you have to take people one on one. If you're a
Yeah.
bad person, you're a bad person. If you're a good person, you're a good person.
What
And that's
does
just
suck?
all there is to it. We are all 100% of us. We are all flawed. We have our good days. We have our bad days.
I agree with you 100%. Like that's
But
it.
that's where it ends.
But let me throw this at you. I guess we're winding down. I'll just throw this last
Yeah,
one at
we
you.
need to land the plane.
Let me just throw this at you. See what you say.
Sure.
This is my personal. I would have a slight, contrary to everything that I just told you.
Hmm.
I would have some issues going round in my, if this were the case. Let me ask you if you would too. You'd probably surprise me, but I find some weirdness going on here. It's not a big deal. This is a what if scenario. So we don't impugn each individual, no matter if the father, third, the grandfather going back in time, whatever the case, 100%. But what if you at the schoolyard or a teenager, that buddy of yours, that potential buddy of yours, this is screwed up, but I'm throwing it out just to see what if they were the son or grandson of Hitler or something like that. Um, I think it still holds true, but there's some stickiness that I personally would have to contend with. Hey,
It's
let's go
funny
have
you
some
mentioned
malt,
that.
huh?
It's funny you mentioned that. No, I never met him. One of his nephews made it to the U.S. From England and joined the U.S. Army, changed his name, of course, and fought in World War II in Europe, marched into Germany with his unit. And it was his nephew. So, you know,
That's a good. That no, that's actually, and I agree with that. I'm just throwing
so
in, but I want you to put the slipper. I want you on in these slippers. That if just there is
again, I stick by my statement, and I try to treat people this way in my daily day-to-day life. And I make it a conscious effort that you take people one on one, and that's it.
no, and I agree with you, but I'm going. So even so, you wouldn't have any pretense, slight, because there's such a cloud, and
Because
I
it
understand.
depends on the person. It depends on the person. If he's walking around with that same mustache trying to teach me a left-handed or right-handed salute, it's like, yeah, number one, you're not going to be my friend, you know?
Yeah,
So you take people on their own because it can go the opposite direction as well. You could take Florence Nightingale's son and be the absolute worst person in the world. So you have to take people one on one.
yeah. Well,
It's
I
got nothing
agree.
to do with your mom or dad. It's got everything to do with you.
I agree, but there's stigmas that you wouldn't even think. It wouldn't even cross your. It wouldn't even cross your mind. I know it belongs to the person, but in a situation like that, hey, my grandpa was an axe murderer, and there's a popular thing. Um, that's a little creep. There's a it no fault of the grandchild, as I said before, but there is some sort of
But
cloudy thing hovering.
not really. It only is if
No,
you make it that way.
okay, okay, fair
Because,
enough.
I mean, that doesn't mean that he is.
No, I know,
I know you know,
but you don't
but
see the variation. You're not
not
even allowing it.
not unless you make it so. And that's what I mean. I keep preaching this, and I know it sounds like a cliche, but I can't control that. The only thing I can control is my reaction to it. And if the dude has never even looked at an axe around me, what do I care?
Okay, yeah,
People. People who grew up with crappy parents, but that didn't make them bad people. Their parents might have been bad people. Maybe somebody whose dad went to prison for something, but that doesn't make that person a bad person.
look, I agree with everything you're saying. I guess I agree with what you're saying as a principle, and I'm kind of surprised because this was actually a stumper for myself. Because I know that in the example that I threw out, I know it's just a what if,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I may have some mysticism concepts going on because
You wouldn't be able to let that go, huh?
I gotta think about it. Because frankly, Mark, I recognize everything that we've been talking about
Mm-hmm.
as a truism, but there's something to do with bloodshed. There's something to do with, you know what I'm saying.
Let,
Which
let,
has nothing to do with. I get that.
let me bring it closer to home. Let's say you found out that a kid you grew up with was a friend when you were in seventh grade, and the family has moved. They're gone. You haven't been in touch with them for years. Let's say you found out now that he was Fidel Castro's nephew. Would that change anything for you?
Yeah.
Even though the kid was just your friend in school.
Yeah, it would change. It would change my understanding of the dynamics of what that means, and it would bring in. So, the thing is, I'm clear
Mm-hmm.
that nothing impugned generationally, be it a Viking
Mm-hmm.
and a raid across
Mm-hmm.
some township, and then you're pointing your finger, you darn descendant of Vikings. That's an extreme, or a closer thing like what you're saying.
And that's why I made it close.
Right. Well, I'm laying out the thing because I'm working it out as you but I'm bringing that in to sort of, so I agree that that person is an individual regardless of
Mm-hmm.
actions and whatnot. But the context of that, let's see if I can. It would bring in the context of a history
Mm-hmm.
that they may or may not have been surrounded by,
Mm-hmm.
that informed them, and in a recent way, and that does have certain ramifications, um, because we do receive the information, but that doesn't mean that his actions or the actions of others can be blamed on him. So
Right.
I get that dynamic, but since it's such a recent thing,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you that it wouldn't affect my perception. Not that the person is now to be, but that there's a history there that, wow, that's problematic, especially in the negativity of what it is and what I understand it as far as, so there,
Mm-hmm.
there would be like, wow, that's quite, I would be shocked.
Now,
But well, let me just say, well,
yeah,
no,
go
go ahead.
ahead. I was
No, no,
gonna
no.
let me throw something in because I purposely left this out of there just to see where you would go with it. But if you then also found out that they fled in exile, that basically their family was under a similar situation to your own family, and they got the hell out of there, basically ahead of the cops because they were in Uncle Fidel's disfavor.
Hmm.
Would that change anything?
Well, that, so that'll work in with what I was going to say as a follow
Okay.
up, because it matches exactly that. So it would change everything because now there's another context to it.
Hmm.
We have representatives for the past 20, 30 years in the United States Congress, Senate, and whatnot
Sure.
at the highest levels of government that are Cubans,
Hmm.
Americans of Cuban ancestry, born in Cuba, became Americans here, like Lincoln Diaz Balart.
Hmm.
If you look up Lincoln Diaz Balart as an example, they're in our government,
Hmm.
and they are married into, or were married into, the Castro family,
Hmm.
and they're serving and have been, but they are Cuban exiles
Hmm.
that when that started to go down, they said, whoa, 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 and they fled.
Yeah.
So that's exactly the scenario you're saying. Now that's way different.
Yeah.
But without that context,
Well, see, and that's why I withheld it because I wanted to see which direction that you would go to see if that did make a difference. If they were part of the exile community who got the hell out of Dodge and it just happened, there's an accidental relationship. Can you hold that? Can do the sins of the uncle in this case count?
yeah, um, with the context added, it's a
Mhm.
different thing.
Yeah,
So then, because we are our own people, but just throwing out a broad thing, you wouldn't
sure.
even. Okay, you know what? There's a movie. Just in my mind, I was a little bit more loosey goosey, but you really honed it in, and so I had to make decisions, and really I had to think. And actually, I will be
I,
thinking about it further.
I,
But let me just
I have my moments. They're few and far in between, but I have
no,
my moments.
no, it always no, it always happens because I threw something out at you, wanting to see what you would say, and then you returned it to me, and I had to think three times over, and and so that's a good thing because it made me okay. So let me say, and I will continue thinking about it. I will believe it or not, you have no idea. You have no friggin' idea. I will start thinking about it, and it might not be just right after. It could be later in the evening, or it could be
My
this.
work here is done.
Well, I do that. You know, I do that.
I
It,
no,
it,
I like to do it to you.
it's a must, but it only, but it's helpful. It
Yeah,
really is.
I know.
Um,
I'm just
no, it is helpful. It is helpful because it's an extra. Now you could say, take it or leave it. It could be something else. Why do we have to
mhm,
delve on one thing? But the fact that it came up and then you did what you did allows for a situation for me to now ponder and see how that works.
mhm,
See how that works in my mind. And well, wait a second. Should I think this? Is that extreme? Not a. And that's good. That's good. I
mhm,
can't tell you that I don't have that creep factor with
mhm,
the parameters you set originally. I do.
mhm.
It gives me a creep factor, anyways. And especially someone like frickin' a Hitler. Are you
Yeah,
kidding me?
I know.
That is a little bit something. I mean, for good. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, hi, I am the son of Dracula, but I have no intentions evil against you. You know,
Mhm.
there is a mysticism side to it. But I'll just say, there's a movie called The Burbs,
Yeah.
which I've told you about, and it's Tom Hanks and
Mhm,
a bunch of like kids from the '80s and whatnot. And in this quite normal Americana neighborhood,
mhm.
one house is kind of like freaking ransacked, abandoned, and whatnot.
Yeah.
A family from like Eastern Europe moves in, and every decision this family from Eastern Europe makes is all the taglines that people use to do with mystery and mysticism and such and this and that and whatnot. So the neighborhoods that are quite the normal, like white bread, like you say,
Uh-huh.
Americana, lunch on Sundays, and really we're not,
Yeah.
let's keep this normal and civil, folks. Well, they're starting, and Tom Hanks, and they're starting to like, man, these people, and because these people, these Eastern European type people, and they're not really the house. It's almost turning into like some sort of Frankenstein monster, werewolf of London, sort of like what's going on here? And so, in the movie, they little by little, and these are older guys, and
Mhm,
like their wives are like, "Honey, will you stop it?" But they're getting suspicious, and so throughout the movie, they keep trying to get in to see and make it and prove that these people are up to no good. And really, all that they are at the end of the movie and stuff, they're just normal people. It's just that
mhm.
they have their own way about. But like the whole movie is building and building to some sort of like Frankenstein monster situation. And at the end of the day, it's just freaking normal people. But and it's a good movie. So it's a little bit of that. Ooh, they're connected to what? Ooh, it
They're
is a little bit
different
of that.
from us, and they'll only question our ways.
Yeah, yeah. So when you throw in a dictatorial figure
Mhm.
and you're just playing like Hot Wheels in the yard with their
Yeah.
grandson or something, it's a little, you know, you have to sort of like, even though that grandson didn't commit
Yeah.
5,000 murders in half an hour,
Yeah.
but
Well,
still.
it's like, dude, I'm here too. There's a reason I don't still live over there.
Yeah, so there's all that. So, and it was a good one. It was good. I threw it at you, thinking that I had this one all wrapped up, and it came back at me, and I had to really think, and
The
and I
top
had to
spin lob that back into your end of the court.
yeah. Well, I had to accept either doubling down and saying yes, what I originally stated is true, or not. But I'm glad that you cleared up, or you added nuance to it by saying,
Mhm.
well, Eloy, but the context is, what if they disagreed with such things? They're still family, but they disagreed with it and they took their own path. Would you still so and so? That's different.
Yeah.
It's also different if you're saying, hi, I'm a dictator. Can your kid come out and play with my grandson? Like, that's different too.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Could little Timmy come out and over here at our guard facility and play with our grandson? That would be a different variation as well. So
Haryu's over here doing his own Viking raid on the chat. So
what did he say?
it's actually kind of whatever he wants to. That's it. It's just all kinds of stuff. It's, you know.
I'm a Pied Piper. I'm a Pied Piper.
Okay, we need to land the plane, man. This is too much fun.
The moral of the story is let your kids play with dictators, kids.
Yeah, just be careful who you're playing Hot Wheels with. I got a mustache hair that's driving me crazy. Go ahead.
We go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time. This is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show, and your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escojedo. We have a site over at Facebook. You can check that out as well. Every now and again, we throw a link here and there so you could check out, some extra stuff about what we were talking about during the show. And we have a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, and you can check us out over there. We're also sponsored by
Harneal Media. Look, it's just you and me talking here, okay? You want a website. You don't think you do. You don't even know you do. You want a website. You've got products, you've got services you want to put in front of the people, and you want to get them talking about those products and or services. There's no better way to do it than with a website. And there's no better way to get your website going than talk to Steve over at Harneal Media. He's very competitively priced. Y'all know. Get over and talk to Steve. I've been saying this for, what is this now, 269 episodes. Just do it already. Get over to harnealmedia.com. Have a chat with Steve. He can fix you right up. Whether you want to set up a web store, whether you want to set up digital downloads that you just get paid for and folks download and off they go, he can handle it. If you're looking to create merch, you want to make t-shirts, you want to make baseball caps, you want to make coffee cups, he can handle that as well. He's a full service website developer. He's very good at what he does. And as I said before, he's very competitively priced. There's a link to Harneal Media in every video episode on this channel for very good reason. So go check him out. That's Steve over at Harneal Media. That's HARNEAL Media.com, sponsor of TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com.
All right. I will leave everybody with this, and yourself as well, with this question. Mark, do you have any photographs floating around online of the back of your head?
I think there may be one.
Perfect. That's all that they will need in 2, 3, 4, 500 years from now, when technology is way beyond what we could conceive of. So they recreate a perfect bust of you and body, and then they take all our episodes and they mathematically congeal it so that they create a virtual Mark that can walk and talk. We have no idea what's going to happen in the future with all this information but they will. It will be wild.
When you stop and think about it, right now you're talking to a virtual Mark.
Yeah, you're just a signal being transferred into my field of senses.
I'm a series of ones and zeros. I'm in the ether. I'm everywhere.
All right. We're out of here.
Peace.
And that might be more true than we